So just a few months ago, it was high school graduation time, and that always makes me think back to my high school graduation, which this was the 20th anniversary of my high school graduation, which is so crazy to think about how time just has flown by. And this year I was thinking about the different ambitions and hopes that I had when I graduated, and I was able to accomplish some of them. Some I am so glad that I did not do. And then other things I actually haven't given up the dream. Someday I want to still do those things. But there's one thing that I wanted more than anything else in the world. It wasn't a certain job or going to a certain school. I honestly just wanted to be a mom. And I saw these families of like 5 kids, and I just thought like that would be my most perfect dream, just to be a mom of a lot of kids. I love children. I just wanted to be a mommy. And I want to tell you today just a little bit about that story, about how that dream died for me and the process that I went through, and yet what God did. There would not be a swing set in my backyard if that dream had stayed dead in the way that it seemed like for so long. And the reason I'm telling this story, though, is not because of me, because this story is so great about Kathryn, Ritchie, living in Texas, but because so many of you also have a story like this. And I just hope that today maybe it could give you a little bit of hope as well as you face the desires that have been in your heart. Well, it was when I was a sophomore in college. My family was living in Russia. We were working in an orphanage there, and one morning we just decided that we needed to go buy more soap for the orphanage. And so my sister Christy and I and a few other people went across the street to the bus stop, and we were just waiting for the bus stop. It was just a normal, any old day, October, and 1999. And I remember looking at my bus ticket for a minute, and that's the last thing I remember, because at that moment when I looked down, a drunk driver who had been just careening down the road drove into the bus stop and hit my sister and me. My sister flew one direction, and she was killed instantly. And I flew a different direction and started a really long process of healing. And over the coming years, the doctors focused a lot on my broken legs. I couldn't walk for a long time. I had a bone graft surgery. I had broken my jaw. I don't actually have a hinge bone on one side of my jaw, so I had to learn how to talk correctly again and eat, and so many different things. And we focused a lot on all those broken bones, but at the same time I had a lot of other issues going on that doctors just weren't really addressing. I stopped having periods. I kind of went into menopause, and I was in my 20s by then, in menopause, and I was starting to lose weight even though I was eating normally. And I even began to have like ovarian cysts rupturing, so much pain. I didn't know what was going on. I went to so many doctors trying to figure out. I went to over 50 doctors before I stopped counting, because just that number was making me so discouraged. I just would go through life having such kind of a brain fog. I ended up working for a congressman in DC for a few years, and then I went to seminary in South Florida, and I remember I would be taking these tests in seminary, Greek tests, and I just couldn't think, and I knew something was wrong. I mean, I know Greek is really hard for some people like me, but still, I just couldn't focus. And I would look at that paper, and it would just be this fog, and I would think, this is not normal. I don't think. I kind of feel crazy. What is going on here? And I remember one time I got a Greek paper back, and a Greek test, and on the bottom my Greek professor said, "Don't worry, God still loves you." It was just so bad, and I thought, this is not right. I'm trying so hard to be normal, and yet I feel like inside I'm just falling apart. I would be exhausted by the time I'd get home. I would shut the door of my apartment, and I would just fall on the floor, unable to do anything. I would just lay there for an hour or two, and yet at 2 o'clock in the morning I'd be wide awake. And I really started to think I was crazy, and I started to lose hope. And at that time, a doctor had talked to me and to my husband about how we would probably not be able to have children because of me and my health issues, and because I was in menopause. We went to one of the greatest clinics in the nation to see what was wrong with me, and instead of giving me hope and answers, I was told there just really wasn't anything to do. I was in menopause in my 20s, and if I ever wanted to have children, it would be through some difficult fertility treatments possibly, or else we needed to seriously consider adoption. But also other things were going on too that I at the time I didn't realize were all kind of related. When I'd go swimming, I would not be able to breathe very well. If the water would get too high for me, I'd start getting like asthma attacks. And I remember talking with that doctor, and he actually said, well, you know, maybe it's related to some kind of psychological trauma that you had from when your sister died. And I knew that wasn't the case. My husband knew that wasn't the case. I had worked through that, but still, I was just having these really weird issues, and my asthma started to get worse. So we were getting desperate, and I was just starting to think that I was just going to always be like this. Even on my wedding day, I was in urgent care that morning because I was so sick, and throughout the honeymoon I was in bed so much just sleeping because I had zero energy. Well, my dad one day saw an ad in the Southwest Airlines magazine, and it was about the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. And at the time he told me, and he told my husband, you guys should really look into going to this for Kathryn. And I said, I don't want to go to any other doctor. I've been to doctors all across the nation, some of the best. I've spent so much money. I've spent so much emotional energy getting my hopes up, and then just hearing that I'm kind of just crazy. And I just don't want to go anymore. And I was speaking at a conference sharing my testimony a few months later, and I almost passed out because I was dealing with I think it was ovarian cyst right then. And so my husband said, you're not flying back to Florida where we lived at the time. I'm going to fly you directly to Houston, and you're going to Dr. Hotze's clinic to see if there's anything that can be done for you. So I said, okay, fine. I'm just another doctor that's going to think I'm crazy. And I went though, and we walked into that clinic, and for the first time ever in my life, I felt that these doctors heard me and they listened to me, and I wasn't crazy, and I wasn't saying just all kinds of random disconnected things. They said this is all tied in, and this is all because your hormones are messed up. The hormones are kind of like an orchestra, our endocrine system, and all the different hormones that we have. And when these hormones get out of balance, like progesterone issues, or our thyroid, which was a big thing for me, or our cortisol, or estrogen, everything goes crazy in our body. And if we can get these in balance, you will see night and day difference. And then they said, and we don't even see why you couldn't have your own baby someday. Well, that was a little bit too much hope, or too scary for me to even think. So I didn't really count on that, but I thought at least if I could just be a normal person again, if I could just be a functional wife, that would be amazing. So they said, we're going to just take bioidentical hormones. They're not synthetic. It's not adding another drug to your body, and we are going to help you get better to where you wanted to be, back to who you know, like when you just are fully well and you just feel like yourself. I hadn't felt like that for so long. And so I started taking progesterone, and found out I had been so estrogen dominant. That's why my body was just kind of falling apart, and that's why I was getting those ovarian cysts, and that's why I wasn't having periods very, very rarely. And when I did get them, they were so painful. As soon as I started that, just within just such a short time, all the cysts went away. I didn't have that awful pain. I started having normal periods again after 10 years of not. My body started pulling out of menopause, and I started to be able to think clearly again. I was not awake in the middle of the night and exhausted during the day. Just a few months later, I was in California taking a law school test, and with the California State Bar, and I was able to focus clearly for hours and hours just sitting there taking this test. And a few months later, when the test results came back and it said I had passed this test, I remember I just sat on the floor and I cried, because a year ago I never would have been able to focus, and here I passed a test that only 19% of the people passed the first time. And I knew it wasn't because I was just super smart, but it was because for the first time in so many years, I could think, and I could look at a piece of paper and put words together and not struggle with it. It was like my whole life was being given back to me for the first time after 10 years, and I could start to actually dream again and feel like, wow, maybe I can be normal and do some of these hopes and dreams that I'd had when I graduated from high school. But it was in March that the most amazing thing happened. About a year after I came to Hotze, I was driving down the road and I just had this feeling that I should get a pregnancy test. And then I thought, well, if I get a pregnancy test, I actually don't really feel like I'm probably pregnant, but it's just this little irritating voice in my head won't go away. But I don't want to get Nicholas's, my husband's, hopes up. So I'll just get the test and I'll take it at the coffee shop and throw it away there, and then no one will ever know about it. So I got the test and I went to this coffee shop really expecting it to be negative, and it was positive. And that is when we found out about our oldest. And that was just the most amazing thing ever. It was the greatest, one of the greatest miracles I'd ever experienced, because doctors for years had said I would not have children, and I had grieved that and wept over that, and grown so much spiritually through that dark time, and really had come to the point where I had given up that dream and believed God was going to give us children in a different way. And then all of a sudden here we have our Nicholas Jr. And then 2 years later, I happened to be in Colorado, and I started throwing up. And my husband said, well, you probably have mountain sickness, drink more water. But the more water I was drinking, the more I was throwing up. And that's when we found out about our second child. And then a couple years later, our third one came along. And then 17 months after that, we had our fourth baby, and I'm actually pregnant right now with number 5. Here's the picture. This was from Christmas, so it's a little bit old, but there's my 4 special people. God has been so amazing. This was a dream that I thought would never happen. It was the greatest dream from high school that God gave back to me through the Hotze Health and Wellness Center. But it didn't just stop there. My healing continued to change. Like you know, I want to talk for a second about postpartum issues. You know, after you have a baby, sometimes you're really not feeling so great, and you're kind of discouraged and depressed, and you don't even know why a lot of times. Well, for my first one, I felt like that a lot. Every day at 2 o'clock, I just feel real discouraged, and I didn't know why. And my hair started falling out and all that kind of stuff. And the Hotze Health and Wellness Center told me, well, it's just because, again, my hormones are out of whack. After you have a baby, your progesterone goes down so fast and your thyroid gets messed up. And they helped me again through bioidentical hormones, rebalancing those hormones. And immediately I felt better. I had no more postpartum depression. I wasn't losing so much hair like that. And so for my next babies, like basically like as soon as I popped that baby out, I started taking progesterone and made sure my thyroid levels are right. And I honestly can say I've had 0 postpartum depression with those other babies. So that has been a huge issue for me. And you know, things like, okay, like when you first get married, you're like, oh my goodness, I'm so excited to get married. We're gonna have this amazing sex life, right? And then you start getting really tired and you have more kids, and okay, maybe you guys have been there. So yeah, that's been me at certain seasons, and I realize that actually can be strongly related to hormones as well. And when our hormones are in balance, when the orchestra is doing what it needs to do, that has greatly helped me. It affects me massively. So our hormones, our sex hormones, postpartum issues, fertility, all of these things, and just overall wellness, brain focus issues and energy issues, all of these things are impacted by hormones. And I had no idea about that until I went to the Hotze Center. Well, this spring, I went through a hard time again. It had been a rough year of my son, my 2-year-old, having some health issues, and I was just drained. and I started to just not feel like myself, and I was kind of discouraged, almost depressed, which is just not like me. And my husband told me, Kathryn, I think your hormones are off. And I said, no, I'm just tired. It's just been a hard year. But he said, talk with the Hotze Health and Wellness Center again and just see what's going on, if they can help you. So I called him up, and sure enough, it was just my thyroid was off, and my adrenals had been so stressed because of my son Edmund. And so literally within 2 days of getting those balanced through bioidentical pills, I felt like me again within 2 days after struggling through that for a while. It's been incredible to me to understand how our hormones so deeply affect us. Okay, so that's my story, but there's a reason I told you all that long blah blah. It's because I want to focus on your story now. I think as moms, it's so easy to focus on everybody else. I know I do that. I did that last year, driving my little 2-year-old all around Houston, trying to get him to the best doctors, trying to heal him. I was awake at 1 o'clock in the morning, messaging people in Australia, trying to figure out how to help him. And as I did that, I started to lose focus again on caring for the mama. And if we're not caring for ourselves, ladies, our whole family is impacted. We are spiritually, emotionally, mentally, physically, but then that it impacts our husband, it impacts our children. I'm realizing that it's so key as a mom to take the investment that we need into our own health first and foremost. And that can be hard because it's hard to be willing to spend money on us because we want to spend it and sacrifice for our kids. It's hard to spend the energy on us when we think we should instead be focusing on our kids. I mean, we love our kids. We would water ski backwards around the world for our kids if that's what it took to help them. And yet we have to realize that we are worthy of being taken care of, and we need to invest in ourselves first before we can be the kind of helper to our families that we need to be. And so I encourage y'all in your story, maybe some of these symptoms and issues you can relate to. Maybe there's other things, hormones impact so many issues. Like for me, I was losing a ton of weight, but thyroid also, that can be just unexplained. When your thyroid's messed up, it can mean unexplained weight gain. Like if you keep trying to diet and exercise, but you're just not losing weight, that could just be simply a thyroid issue. Or if you're struggling with low libido or just lack of energy, or just any of those things, just look them up online. There's so many issues that are impacted by thyroid. All that stuff. If you just focus on the orchestra and focus on getting your health better, it can be life-changing. You can ultimately get your life back after years or months of discouragement and not understanding what's going on. So that's a little of my story. I want to encourage you to look more into this. Hotze Health and Wellness Center is who helped me, and they're located in Houston, but they have guests. They call them guests. Isn't that cool? Not patients. I don't ever feel like a patient when I talk with them, just like a royal guest. They have guests all throughout the world, and you can give them a call for free and just chat with them, tell them your story, and see if maybe they can help you. Hotze, Hotze Health and Wellness Center. Look them up online and tell your friends.